All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. We are here today to discuss the Well of Ascension. So if you're here, say hi in the comments and let us know what you thought. Oh, Em's here, and she just finished this morning. You are in great company, Em. I just finished yesterday. And so did Christy. Stephanie, when did you finish?
About 2 minutes ago.
So you are in great company. A lot of procrastinators, and then there's Rich who finished like a month ago. So,
Yeah.
anyways, so let's just start with kind of like general thoughts. I guess you can just kind of let us know what you thought overall. This is a reread for all of us. And yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty sure. I know it is. So just share overall thoughts if you would like. Do you want to start us off, Rich?
Sure. This is an interesting book for me. So this is my third read of it. My first, I remember enjoying it. My second, honestly, I didn't enjoy it nearly as much. I just kind of the dark atmosphere, really, of all of Mistborn, kind of weighed on me for that whole second read through. This time, I feel like I was kind of maybe more ready for it, and I just enjoyed it. I think I might have kicked up the Audible speed. I remember doing. I think I did this one more on Audible, and I just kind of enjoyed some of the themes about it, and the parts that I knew would annoy me, I just tried to say, okay, well, let me just sort of, I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to identify with this character going through this train wreck of their life, but I'll just kind of observe it and kind of look at it from afar. So I think I enjoyed it a lot more this time.
That's good. I'm glad. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Victoria's here in the comments. I'm so happy. Victoria could have come on, but she hasn't read it in a long time. She's getting ready to reread it, so that's fine. Now we have the whole range. People who finished today, people who finished a month ago, people who finished the other book. It's perfect. What are your thoughts, Stephanie?
This is my third time reading it. I read it last year intending to finish the whole trilogy, and then Tiffany messaged me and asked if I wanted to join the read along. So I was like, I'll save the third one. So yeah, the first time I really, really loved it, and it's one of the books that made me realize I like political intrigue and that kind of twisty turny type of plot. And the second time, I think I'm like Rich. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first one. But then this time I was back to really, really enjoying it again. And it does have slower parts, but I'm just so interested that it didn't feel like it drug at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really, really enjoyed this reread. And I'm excited for book 3.
Me too. Yes. And yes, this is insane. And I love that this rhymes. I don't know if this was your intention, Em, but insane Zane, and it actually works. Although, well, I guess we can talk about this in a bit.
Yes, there's a spoiler there.
There's a moment at the end that I forgot about reading this, and I'm like, what does that mean? I don't even know. Anyways, we'll talk about that later. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Yo. What did you think, Christy? This was your second or third time reading?
I loved it. The ending stretched out quite a long time. It was like longer than I remembered. I kept thinking, isn't it done now? But then things kept happening. There was a giant battle with Kolas, and then we get to what do we do? It's the Well of Ascension, and then Sazed realizing before she gets there that, oh no, I need to stop it. I didn't remember how all of that went down exactly. I just remember that it was bad. And I was so confused the first time I read it. So this time I enjoyed the ride so much. And yeah, Zane, I could live without Zane, but everything else I enjoyed a lot.
Zane's kind of creepy,
Yeah.
Kinda.
I'm trying to be kind, I guess, and I don't know why to a fictional character. It's
I mean,
interesting.
honestly, if he was in real life, I mean, you would probably call the cops on him.
Oh, for
Let's
sure.
just be honest.
Not even probably. This is so true, Victoria.
Yes.
This was interesting, but this is one of those times. Last time we were on, we were talking about fan art and helping you visualize. And I was like, you know what? I don't ever really want to look up fan art for this. No, thank you.
I forgot
Tricky enough
how
in my brain.
creepy looking. I totally blocked out the description except for the blue skin.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's really kind of gross, honestly.
I agree, though. The monsters, I actually think the monsters are one of the best parts of the series. I love how dark the monsters get. Yeah, really interesting to me.
Yeah. So I really
like with the sword. That's my cover, the cover of the one I have with the Kola sword. So awesome.
Yes, I love it. Wonderfully weird, Victoria says.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Bursting at the seams.
You literally.
Really, for real. Oh, yeah. So this was my second time reading this. And my first time around, this was my favorite book of the trilogy by a lot. And just like Stephanie, this was the book that I realized that I love politics in a fantasy world. And I loved it just as much the second time around. I loved it more than my reread of book one, even. So I'm like, okay, I think maybe this is still my favorite in the series because I love kind of Elen just coming into himself as a leader, and I love just kind of the dynamics. I love the whole like Orsur storyline is one of my favorite parts of this story. Yeah. Although rereading it, I'm like, this is obvious, but I was shocked. The first time I read it, I was like, oh, but now I'm like, the clues were all there.
I got them all highlighted too, and it's I mean that's good mystery though. Like when you see, okay, yes, the clues were all there, and some of them were
obvious,
kind of obvious.
Yeah,
and then
but I did not see it coming at all.
Does that though? Like he, in retrospect, it's like super obvious, but I never guess his twists ever. He just is so good at like putting in so much detail that you I mean, some people are not that detailed except for when there's like a mystery surrounding it, and so you can kind of tell, oh, this is what they're trying to hide. Not Brandon Sanderson. He has so much detail everywhere that it's like you don't see it until you've already like read it once, you know.
Well, and I think the same thing was true when we were the whole thing Christy mentioned with like the Well of Ascension and Sazed realizing last minute. It's like it was right there at the moment that Sazed found it. Like, I'm writing this in metal because metal can't be changed. Like, it was there the whole time.
Like page one.
Yes.
I think that was like literally the first epigraph.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's on the back of the book of this edition too. Right there. Yeah,
oh, that's a very
really
good point.
Like, Sanderson's not like an actual like mystery writer, but like he weaves so much like intrigue and like plot twist, but he leaves the clues the whole time, just like a really good mystery writer.
Yes. So, he's good at mystery plots. That's another thing I really love about him. His monsters and his mysteries. Sorry,
and a lot of it is the sort of, I mean, look at Mistborn. Mistborn, like the first book practically starts with tutorial level about the magic system, and yet there's still mysteries in the magic system, and part of the fun is the little gotchas that okay, so the tutorial level left a few little things out that turned out to be kind of important.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just like so fun because I've heard a lot of people hate on this book because it's so different than book one. Like, he's doing something totally different. This is not heist. This is not overthrow the government. This is like we're in a siege. We're in a standstill for a lot of this book. So I've heard a lot of people say they think it's kind of boring, and I totally disagree.
Realistic though, I mean, in any kind of like battle or whatever, you're gonna have some, a
lot of waiting.
Yeah, without diving into it, I thought it's kind of interesting because I feel like that's something, if you look at historically, any revolution that's like their first challenge, is that kind of all the people that got everybody to where they're at, their thing was destroying the government. And that's what they were really good at. And now they're in charge of the government. And often then they're confronted with a bunch of people just like them that want to destroy the government.
Yeah.
And what are they going to do about this?
That's a really good point. Just because you're
I mean,
good
that's
at
kind of
revolution.
like there are heists in this book, but the heists are all like, you know, Strath and Set and Penrod. You know, well, not so much Penrod, but actually no, Penrod and then what's his Jastes or whatever. You know, like they're the ones you know, trying to overthrow the government now.
Yeah. Yeah. And heist because they're trying to get the Adium now too. So yeah, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does bring a lot of chaos.
He does.
Oh my goodness.
A lot. Okay.
Well, right. So you know, Germany, we're diving right into spoilers, but like, you know, Zane was obviously one of the people, and honestly, Vin too. That's sort of like, okay, this is a train wreck in slow motion. I'm gonna appreciate and study it for what it is. You know, it's like reading certain characters in Stormlight as well. It's sort of, you know, you can appreciate it, but sort of also appreciate that, you know, I don't want to be too attached to this right now.
That's a good point. It's like, oh, I'm glad I don't know these people in real life. I can just be entertained and move
friends like this.
Exactly.
Zane is interesting because I feel like at first I'd have like a moment of sympathy for him. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he did have a crappy life. And then we get the scene with Amaranta, I think is her name. And he had like set her up. And it's like, okay.
I know. I'd forgotten about that.
And I totally forgot about it.
Yeah.
I blocked that out of my mind.
And then it was like, okay, yeah, I'm glad you're gone. It's fine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you look at like Vin had a really crappy life too.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I mean, I know kind of like you're like, okay, well, maybe her life was better because she's acting better because of Kelsier, but I don't think she would have ever gone to the level that Zane went. Like, I don't think that was her.
Yeah, but I feel like Zane was just like by pure evil, and then Vin had more morally gray.
Zane was getting different messages. I think we
Yeah.
go into this more in book
Yeah.
3, but in his head, the voice he heard, he thought it was God telling him to kill everyone, whereas Vin's voice was, you know, like Reen telling her
That's true.
not to trust anyone, versus like, well, I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't talk. But so the voices were different for them. So
Right.
Yeah, well, you can see even in this book, both Zane and Vin are pawns. It's just sort of Zane was the pawn to be sacrificed to get Vin to where she needed to get to do her thing. And it's kind of, but they're both kind of raised to some extent to be pawns, and they both, you know, they had a lot of things going, and I guess, you know, Vin sort of fell in with Kelsier while Zane had Strath, you know.
yeah.
Lucky him. Yeah, this is a good point too. I think that like
Yeah.
continued to only operate in trauma, where would she have ended up? It was Kelsier that helped kind of pull her out of that. Hi, Chrissy.
Hi, Chrissy.
Yeah, we'll get to this a different time.
Yeah.
Next
Yeah,
time.
Well, it's only mentioned, I mean, it's like literally one sentence in the entire book that I completely missed the first time I read it, and I did catch it this time.
Yeah. They both had a mean, yeah. 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 It's just it's interesting to parallel them because, you know, Rich saying that they were pawns, that's kind of what like Mistborns were raised to be, especially ones that were not actually noble. Like if they were actually a noble, like if Elend had been born a Mistborn, then he would have had a different treatment. But like these that are like half ska, half nobility, their whole point is to be a pawn.
Right.
That's the only purpose that like they're being used for by nobility and being like hired by nobility as a threat for power and all of that kind of stuff. So
Well, and I think actually Sanderson gets a bunch of his books, but even the nobility, I mean, obviously, you know, you live a much better life being a noble and a ska in these books, but they are also pawns to a certain degree, like in the machinations of their family. Like they go to, like, you saw that a lot in the first one. They're all going to these balls and forming alliances, and like they're not just there. I mean, yes, they are kind of there to have fun, but when push comes to shove, they have family duties. Yeah. And you look at Ellen and, you know, the pressure he was under and he kind of didn't, but he almost got assassinated as a result. I mean, if Straff had gotten his way, Ellen would have been killed in the middle of the first book.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of, you know, they had duties too, and they were pawns, just of a different sort.
Yeah, that's true. And they were all definitely like, Lord Ruler was the one in charge. So even there, they were pawns for him. He's posturing them where he wants them to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And as we kind of are hinted at, well, actually, we definitely find out in this book. I mean, he also had his sort of roles and duties as well, which we only, you know, it takes this entire book to kind of get a taste of what those were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's actually, so the role of the Lord Ruler is actually one of the things I had in my notes. And there's a couple comments throughout here about sort of, you know, this whole world lived in peace for 1,000 years. I mean, it was an oppressive peace, but like there's these Kolot's armies wandering around, but really their purpose was to keep everybody in line. I imagine they didn't actually end up having a fight much because who's going to want to take them on? But you know, it comes to war, and they talk about like these nobles are like, you know, everybody had gone to balls and this and that, but nobody was ever a general. Nobody knows how to fight a war, and you know, things like that. And there's also talk about like how the culture, even fashion, had stagnated for 1,000 years because just everybody imitated the Lord Ruler, and the Lord Ruler does what everybody does. They dress however they dressed when they were a kid, and it's interesting how like that whole concept of culture becoming very static under this immortal dictator regime is kind of interesting once explored a little bit.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too, that they talked about how the fashion had stagnated. That was a really interesting element. That was something that I wouldn't have thought of. But if you want to dress like the Lord Ruler does and try to kind of like emulate him to impress him or whatever, like, and he's not changing, then neither would you. So I thought it was interesting too. Reading, I had read, I guess it was like 2 months ago, I read like a North Korean defector memoir that talked about people who left North Korea had a lot of issues then being somewhere where there was freedom, because they were used to every single decision being made for them. And so it was like really overwhelming. And some of them, like, as they're adjusting, just kind of want someone to tell them what to do because they're not used to the level of freedom that they're experiencing. And it actually talks about that. He reads a passage about this too, where it says, it seems that the rebels found the chaos of transition more difficult to accept than the tyranny they'd known before. They joyfully welcomed back authority, even oppressive authority, for it was less painful for them than uncertainty. And I was like, that sounds exactly like the North Korean defector memoir I read.
Well, yeah, I mean, they didn't just...
Okay.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
No, I was just going to say, are like prisoners when they're in prison for a really long time and then they get released. I mean, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, and I think that there are probably some people who end up back in prison sometimes because there's not a good rehabilitation system, but sometimes it's like, well, they like want to go back to more certainty, and there are people who are like North Korean defectors who like long to go back because of the level of uncertainty that they're now facing, which is just like fascinating, because we have such a concept of freedom because we've grown up in freedom. So we're like, well, why wouldn't you want that? but like they've never experienced it, so it's actually overwhelming.
Right.
That's a really good point, Emily. Where
Mhm.
it's like, well, at least we were fed there. That's exactly what there's like people say here. They're like, well, we were oppressed by the Lord ruler, but we were in peace. He made sure we had food. We weren't in siege wondering if we'd live through the winter.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like Sanderson just invented all of this. It's so much, and you see it's like the psychology of leadership that's explored so much in this. People want the familiar. Like, part of what ended up making Ellen successful wasn't because he had better ideas, but he started dressing the part more and acting like a leader, and and so on. And it's sort of like it's kind of crazy that ends up being the determining factor for who runs the country, is who plays the part. And it's kind of like, it's like, well, no wonder we elect actors into office or whatever, because it's literally what they're good at.
Right.
Yeah, that's
a
a good point. They can play the role because they're acting. Yes, exactly. Because it's what they know.
Or just even in like the corporate world, you know how to play the game, so it gets you ahead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they elected Ellen, who was a nobleman of the class that was oppressing them, is really interesting. It's very like the Russian Revolution, because the lower classes caused this whole revolution, and then they kept giving power back to the people who had originally oppressed them. Some of the same people were in power after the revolution as were before the revolution, because they were just not comfortable being like, okay, I'm going to lead everything now after being oppressed for so long. So that's really reflected really well as well here.
Well, and Ellen didn't just get elected in some, everybody nominate whoever you want, and Ellen was just one nominee of many. I mean, he kind of stepped up, and he was like in the right place at the right time with the right relationships to be in that position. I mean, he certainly wasn't the most qualified person necessarily. Well, I mean, he was actually pretty qualified, but at the same time, there's other politicians who were probably more used to giving orders, but they weren't dating Vin at the time, or whatever.
At the time.
Ellen lucked out, and so did all the people, that he was the one that they chose. But they didn't realize their luck.
Yeah, and that's something you see so much in this. It's sort of like, it's like Ellen's got all these principles for how the place should be governed, but in the end, it only becomes stable because Vin goes out and assassinates, the people that are going to be the opposition, or points a sword at him and tells them to get on their knees, and that's what ends up determining when the choice is taken away. And it shows so much how much in a crisis, or just in general, people, it's like they talk about greedy algorithms or whatever, where you just sort of optimize for whatever causes me the least pain in this moment. It's like going back to Egypt. It's like, in this very moment, let's not think about where I'm going to be 5 years from now. 5 minutes from now, this will be a little easier than that. And that's like how far ahead people tend to think. Because that's certain. If I do this, I'll definitely have that. Who knows where I'll be 5 years from now.
Yeah. This is interesting too, Emily, saying this, that you can know that something is a better choice, but there's such comfort in familiarity, even if the familiarity is a toxic situation. That is
that's a really good point.
So true.
I agree completely, although, it's kind of funny that Vin is almost the opposite of that in this story, because all of her friends, like, she's going to abandon everybody who actually cares about her to possibly run off with the Zane fellow. That's like the train wreck of this story. And it's kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I think it can be so easy for like trauma or situations like that to get so in your head that then you start isolating yourself and you kind of almost become an echo chamber. And that's what Zane was speaking to in Vin. And it was really interesting because I put this in the Discord, that Vin goes back and forth between, oh, I'm just a knife and he's just using me, to, oh, he doesn't need me anymore. And both of those, she has the same reaction to both. I'm like, girl, it can't be that he's using you and he doesn't need you at the same time. But in the same breath, you're saying this, basically. But that's kind of like, it doesn't always make sense when you're dealing with like deep emotional trauma.
Right.
There's
really
a
good
lot of identity, and Ellen's going through this too. Just maybe not in as sort of dysfunctional way, but like, am I the elected leader who is going to be about principle wherever it takes us, or am I going to be the pragmatic leader who I know what these people need and I'm going to make it happen whether they like it or not, kind of a thing. It's, he's gripping with this, and of course Vin is going through this crisis of like, am I just an assassin? It's so interesting, the roles that people, are forced into and are not comfortable with.
Yeah. I loved the scene though, where they're both like, we don't understand each other, and they both go to Say's head and say the exact same thing. And he's like,
Yes.
You guys are more alike than you think you are. I loved that so much. You're absolutely right, Em, though. It was definitely the insecurities, the things that her brother had sown into her, the way she grew up in these like thieving gangs, and just believing that she didn't belong anywhere. Yeah. Isn't that so true, though? Like, things just don't end up the same way that you think when you read about it. Like, he had all these great ideas, and they were good ideas. But I do think it's interesting because Christy was talking about the same people who are like overthrowing things, and then they're like, but I don't think I'm ready to lead. And I think that like this is addressed multiple times, that Elend is a better king than Kelsier ever would have been for that reason, because sometimes the same people who are like revolution overthrowing, they might not have the leadership skills to lead with like the political side.
Right.
Yeah. It's a different skill set.
Yeah, even though Elend was very idealistic, but
it's like ruin and preservation are like different things.
Maybe it might be like that. I don't know. That's a really good point. They are.
Oh, that's so true.
So this is so true.
Yes.
Elend does not have street smarts to save his life. That's why he needs Vin.
Yeah.
He has to be paranoid because he's got zero paranoia. He's like, oh, this is kind of suspicious, but it's probably fine. This mist creature, this other thing.
What a nice way to go through life, though. Like, his stress level must be so low. Not all the time, but like.
Can you imagine if Tindril were in charge? I feel like it would almost be like, somebody hiring the assassin in white and be like, okay, I got a list for you, Vin.
Sensitive voice. Nice crossover. I love it. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I'm loving. Are there things that I like had forgotten about? Like I remembered plot points of this book, but I've forgotten like kind of starting to like dig into like Kandra lore and stuff.
Yeah.
That was so fun.
I forgot about some of those, like the little conversations that Vin has, and how they kind of warmed up to each other, and then he just kept resting his head on his paws. I know he was a traitor, but it was adorable.
But it wasn't his fault.
That's true.
In the contract, and he betrayed his contract at the end. So, yeah.
He did.
This is my third. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, this is my third time reading the book, and I still couldn't remember when the switch happened between Orstur and Tensu, and I was still looking for it, and I was like, because when the body appears, you're kind of like, is that it? But I still couldn't remember for sure.
I actually found it in a quote last night. I can my quote here. Oh gosh.
While you're looking, I just want to say I agree with Victoria that the Kandra, I think, are my favorite too. It was fun to see the similarities between the Kandra and the Colossus, though. That was kind of interesting at the end there.
I think the Inquisitors are the most interesting.
You copy and paste so fast. Yeah.
Oh,
So
so
you did
that's
mention it. Yeah.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is
So
this
yeah,
what
you
it-
get that. You see where it is. If you were looking for it, which this time I was, and it was so obvious because there were things where she's like, well, remember when we talked about this? And he's like, yes. So I'm like, okay. I feel like she should know. but you know, you don't expect it to.
Yeah, there was one or two other obvious clues right around that time too. It's sort of like, well, remember when I was telling you about this? Like, I seem to recall something about that. Like, she was talking for like 3 paragraphs about it. Like, you're having this back and forth about this in detail, and now it's like, oh, I think I remember that.
Or when she asked him about, she's like, remember when you talked to Kelsier about this? And he's like, we didn't talk about that. He's like, I wasn't a part of that conversation. Like, I think you were. I love this. The third act of miscommunication and breakup. No.
I love that.
Comparing Hallmark and Sanderson is not something I thought I was going to get today, and I love it. Oh, it's too funny.
You know, something I find I really like about Sanderson is he's willing to take on some of these sacred cows and not offer an alternative. Like so Sanderson, pro-democracy or anti-democracy? Because there was no democracy in it but the Lord Ruler. And then you end up with, okay, well, now we're going to have all this democracy and we're going to end up with Penrod instead. You know, and, you know, it was just going to lead to Straff and another Lord Ruler. And it's kind of... but he's willing to just say, well, look, you know, there's no clear answers here. You know, bad things happen either way. And he's willing just to kind of pick at things and not, you know, he doesn't have to make it all on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
I love that too. And I think that's why I love politics and fantasy world, because like I don't have real stakes in this. So we can explore it and talk about it, and it's hypothetical. It's not what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So I think I like that there's problems with every system because people aren't perfect and there's going to be corruption. Somebody's going to come in, and whenever there's an opportunity for power, corrupt people are drawn to that. So there's always going to be an element of something that's not good or someone that's getting into even what looks like a perfect system, which Elend figures out very quickly.
Democracy succeeding depends on having good people to step into the role of powerful person. We have to have people who are willing to be servant leaders, you know, like Christ, you know, rather than power hungry megalomaniacs.
And that is also why checks and balances are important too, which is what Elend was trying to create in his government. But then those same checks and balances allowed them to boot him right out of there because they were more corrupt than he was. Pros and cons, man. I agree, Victoria. I don't watch Hallmark movies, but I would if they were created by Sanderson, because they would have some level of like fantasy in it.
They had probably in them.
Yeah. All right, Rich has another quote. I implemented your plans, Elend. I did everything we talked about. Freedom, political honesty. I trusted my allies rather than crushing them to submission. And you know what happened? They killed everyone. Yeah. Oh, I was so sad when I read that. Where it's like, you think that he was just like corrupt and that's why he was with the Colossus, but like, he's like, I tried to do what we talked about. And they killed my whole family. Like,
he didn't have Ben.
Yeah, it's so sad.
I mean, that would have been Ellen's fate, you know. I mean, he would have just been deposed by Penrod or whatever, and maybe, and if he lasted that long.
He would have been assassinated for sure. That definitely would have happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure that's on all of our minds in America as well. Because it's an election year here as well. It's almost time for me to get off social media until next year. It's real close. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. I do
Yeah.
love the way that Sanderson explores this kind of stuff, given current affairs. But like I said earlier, it feels less threatening. Yes.
Yeah. Christy, I heard you say before, circling back, that you really like the Inquisitors.
Oh yes.
Yes. I think it is explored more in book 3 because I remember the first time I read this. At the end, I was, for some reason, so shocked that Kelsier's brother, Marsh.
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
so shocked about what happens at the end and confused because he doesn't seem to be like wanting to do what he's doing. But my favorite magic system by far is in book 3, and it gets explained more. And it has a lot. It explains a lot about the Inquisitors. So
Oh, yeah.
I think they are definitely like probably the darkest part. They're one of the darkest things about the series, but I find them really fascinating.
Well, and they get explored a bit in Era 2 as well, eventually.
Okay.
Yes, the whole magic system is very important in Era 2.
I'm so excited to read Era 2 because I haven't read it yet. So I'm very excited for that. I know that it feels very different from Era 1. Like it's not as dark because Era 1 is really dark. But
It's really,
It's
especially
like
on a reread. The first read, I think I was just all caught up in the magic system and the Cosmere. That's another a little game as I read this book. I'm trying to think of how much of the Cosmere did Sanderson really have thought out as he was, because Mistborn is like Era 1 is some of his earlier books, and you can definitely see the Cosmere stuff by book 3. You know, it's getting really into it. But you kind of wonder, did he really know where this is going in book 1 as much? I guess, you know, he dropped a hint, but you really wonder how well formed some of this was.
yeah. I've wondered that too. I'm like, did you have all this already in your brain? Because I mean, I guess it wouldn't surprise me, but
Yeah, because it wasn't like World Hoppers mentioned. I think in this book.
World Bringers.
No, yeah, it's the World Bringers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had that thought too for a second when it popped up, and then it was like, no, that's something different.
Okay, thanks. I was listening to it kind of fast at the end, trying to finish it.
Although, I mean, Hoyd is in book 1, so
Yeah. Yeah,
I read it and I was like, what? Because this was my first Sanderson book, so I wouldn't have known who he was.
Yeah, well, he was in like the early books. He's just a Easter egg. Like he shows up, but he's not. He's rarely integral to the plot. Probably the most integral he gets is in Warbreaker, maybe, but he's still kind of a bystander. But then in later books, like especially Stormlight, he starts like he's a character.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I did some research, Victoria, and Era 2, all of the books are way shorter than Era 1.
Yes.
Like the first one is like around 300 pages in Era 2, and the longest one is book 4, and it's around 500 pages, which is still like this one in my edition was almost 800 pages, well, of Ascension. So I'm like, okay, I think actually it's going to be a little easier when we get to Era 2.
I think they read faster to me too, which I mean, I've only read Era 2 once, and I know they're shorter, but it just felt like I got through them so much faster.
Yeah, Hero Ages is longer than any book in Era 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And way shorter than anything in Stormlight.
Well, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Did you hear the new Stormlight? He was being pressured because the binder physically couldn't make a book as big as he was trying to write them.
I think he posted about that in my Discord, and I just laughed because I was like, but of course, he wrote it too long to be traditionally bound.
He's like, challenge accepted. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm. I think you'll be okay if you take a couple days break, because like I understand needing a break to breathe in between, but I do feel like even though these books are really long, I would sit down and it would go, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I just read 100 pages, because it does read pretty fast.
Yeah, I will say book 3 is really enjoyable. That said, it's. I mean, if you said book 2 was dark, book 3 I think gets darker personally.
I agree.
it's definitely, that's part of why I also kind of spaced them out the way I did. But it's, it can be a bit much.
Yeah, that's fair. I love that Victoria said this. He was bored with it mapped out in his brain. Yes, the lore building.
Yes,
So fun.
yes.
And this was like, he was my first high fantasy. And he's what made me realize that I could do this. Because he made it like, people criticize him for his prose not being that special. And I'm like, his prose not being like super purple prosy or super difficult made it so easy for me to understand what he was talking about, though.
Yeah.
So I
His
think it works
concepts
really well.
are complicated enough. He does not need purple prose on top.
Yes.
And his humor, I mean, he's got like certain symbolism and some of the concepts, even in this book. I mean, it's kind of, you don't have to stop and think about it, but some of the concepts are very nuanced, and some of the contrasts, especially you start comparing book 2 to book 3, which we obviously won't get into now, but there's some nuanced takes there. And then in terms of prose, Emily was just talking about Tress, and there's a certain comment regarding somebody's fondness for cannons that, it's just so cleverly written and just so hilarious. He's definitely got away with words too.
Oh, I agree. It just like, it doesn't have the same, I guess, strikingness as some people's might, but like, I think it's perfect. Like, his world building is so intricate, and his character work makes you invest in them so strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and I agree with this too. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it. Like, I really don't. It's amazing.
And like trying to explain like that to people, like, you need to read Brandon Sanderson, but let me give you some info. It's like,
I've seen memes of that where it's like, oh, I read this, it was great. Here's another, and there's like a stack of like 20 books. I love it. Christy has a quote that she put up here. We will die to show that there are ska who will not be bullied, who will not back down. I love that. That is such a like revolution.
Yes.
So good.
Well, I will say to this that may be a timely read if you're going to stick with this entire read along.
I haven't read The Emperor's Soul yet.
I love that one. I read it for the first time.
You might want to squeeze that in sometime before the very end of this read along.
Okay, I can do that. I have the
It's a short.
Arcanum Unbounded, and it's in there,
Mm-hmm.
So I can do that.
And so is the book we are reading.
Yeah,
Isn't it one of his novellas?
all the novellas that we're reading are in Arcanum Unbounded.
Okay.
All of them are. So The Secret History and what is it? Allomancer Jack, and there's one other one, I think.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember.
The 11th Metal.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. All of those are in that. So if you have that mind up, you'll have all of them, and you'll have The Emperor's Soul as well, and some novellas and short stories that tie in with Stormlight too. So
I was just glancing over at my spreadsheet where I've got the whole reading list.
Ooh, that is a hot take.
I haven't read Elantris yet.
I do too.
That's one of the few of his that I haven't read yet. Is Elantris and Era too. So.
Well, I think Elantris has a lot of great concepts in it. The execution was a bit like it's a little exposition heavy at points.
Mm.
I think I read Elantris
too. I know Christy loves Elantris.
It
love
just has
it.
the right concept for me.
Yeah. This is true. This is very true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that, like, part of me is a little bit critical of some authors who are publishing multiple books a year because they tend to kind of all feel the same. Sanderson's doesn't. I haven't read any Tchaikovsky yet, but like there's a lot of authors that are like super prolific authors. I'm trying to think of one and I can't now, but like the people that you see at every thrift store, there's like 20 of their books sitting there, and they're like mystery writers or something, and they all just kind of feel really similar. And I love that Sanderson doesn't. He really, that's why I know some people didn't love like the tone of Tress and how it felt, but I'm like, because this is written as Hoyd as the narrator, like the narrative style is totally different, which I thought really showed off his writing chops, that he was able to write in a way that was totally different than other books of
I love Tress for being like a breath of fresh air, because honestly I felt like the Lost Metal and Rhythm of War, I felt like those are getting a little samey and formulaic in some ways, and so I feel like, you know, I really like the break and the change.
Yeah. Bye, Victoria. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye, Victoria.
And you're welcome to come, even if you don't finish Hero of Ages. You're still welcome to come hang out. Tress is really fun. I loved it. It came at the perfect time for me too, where I needed something that was gonna like make me laugh a lot, and it did.
Yeah.
And Tress was actually the first book that my older sister read of Sanderson, because she saw the cover and she's like, "Oh, it's so pretty," and then she picked it up and read it, and I was like, "Let me introduce you to Mistborn." And so she's been reading along with us. She's almost done with Well of Ascension, so she'll watch this back after she's done. She commented on our last one after I posted it, but she just moved, so she has a really good excuse for not finishing. But yeah, it's just like I'm surprised at how many people I've heard recently that have started with Tress and really liked it. So
we haven't talked about Tyndall yet.
Yes, we should. We haven't talked about her.
What do you guys think about her?
I really like her.
She was the one I was saying would have the assassin and whitelist, you know, made up for if she were the one in charge. She would have been very pragmatic. Like, all right, well, then John number 1, Straff, number 2, Penrod, number 3.
Yeah. That's so
I love the sense of humor she brought too. I forgot how funny she is.
Yeah.
And the scene with Vin when they were shopping for dresses.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing.
I totally forgot
that
about
hilarious.
I had forgotten
that. Oh gosh, what if we get into trouble? Who will protect us?
Yeah.
I had totally forgotten about that.
Both. You can be a girly girl too, and I loved it.
Yeah, I love her. Although I will say that in my first read and then my reread, I didn't have an emotional response as much with her as I did with, you know, Clubs and Dachshund. Like, I was just, and I think it's just because I didn't know her as well, you know. So,
yeah,
I had the exact opposite. I've been on an emotional roller coaster with her, because I think at first I really was like, she's so mean to Ellen. Like, I had Vin's reaction the first time I read this, but she's grown on me, because I think in real life, if people act like that, I kind of steer clear of them because they give me so much anxiety. But like in book form, I can see how essential she is for Ellen, and I end up loving her because also Seizu loves her, and yeah, I think she's very flawed in some ways, but like so essential because she really speaks her mind and she has a good mind, you know.
Well, here's the thing too, Krista. You said that someone like her is someone that you would not really be close with in real life. She would not treat you the way she treated Ellen, because she treated him that way because of his personality. She would treat you more kindly like she did Vin.
That's probably true.
Well, but it also depends on your role, right? If you're going to be the president of the country or something like that, then, and you're a nice person, you know, you'd be like, you know, you need to have that person assassinated, or, you know, like she kind of tells you the hard advice. You know, I feel like though, like honestly, like a lot of side characters in these stories, she doesn't get much of a story of her own. Like, she's got like a progression, obviously, in her relationship with Sazed, and she does come around a bit with Ellen and becomes a bit more balanced, but in part that's because Ellen becomes stronger and sort of puts her in her place, which I think is what she wants him to do. And then she finds more of the compromise, but that's like, I think, the extent of her journey. She's kind of like a complete character, and she serves a purpose in the narrative, but and I mean, I guess that's true. You can't give every side character an arc in a 400-page book or whatever.
That's why he has Stormlight.
Yeah.
You can give every side character an arc. But I think also too, in terms of how she treated Elend grew up with Strath for a father. He can take the criticism. He can take it and it not crush him. And she knew that. Like, she knew he needed to not be a doormat, but she knew that, like, I can say this to him and it's not going to make him just, like, implode, essentially, you know?
Well, that was always her motivation. She was sort of like, you know, I want to bring out the best. This is what we have, you know, and maybe if there was a better leader for the job than Ellen, maybe she might have tried to push him aside for somebody else. Maybe, I don't know, but there wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was so interesting, the conversation that the two of them have with Elend, of like, when he is honest and it's like, yeah, you can change your votes, and, you know, and he tells them he was honest, and he's like, and they were just like, can a good man be a good king?
Yeah.
That was an interesting conversation that I really liked. I was like, this is, it's tough, because it's like, in order to keep people in line, do you sometimes maybe have to do things you'd rather not do? But also you want to stay true to yourself and your own conscience. So how does that all play out? And I'm like, yeah, I could never be in that role.
Now, remind me of this in our next live stream, because I have such an interesting parallel thought on that, but it's completely book 3, so I can't talk about it now.
Okay, I'll try to remember. Make a note, Rich, with your notes to bring it up.
Yeah.
Right.
You've got all the notes.
Maybe say, can a good man be a good god, maybe, is the good question.
Yeah, okay, yeah. That's fair. Bye, Chrissy. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, I agree with this. Yeah.
With what?
That I was more sad for Sazed in that moment.
I wasn't sure if you were starting something else. That's why.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Okay. I just meant, like, because we get to know him more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the problems I had with her, was I felt like she was constantly disappointed in Sazed, but you see at the end, she really loves him, but it's the way she tries to change him and his whole course. That was like really, in my mind, like, is she right to do that? So I was really conflicted about that. But Sazed ends up loving her, but also Sazed can sometimes be extremely down on himself, you know? So I don't know. I had mixed feelings.
I think also, you know, Tindwyl was also a leader of her people. So this was not just, hey, this is my friend. Hey, this is someone I'm in love with. It's like, hey, I'm part of the Synod, and I am telling you that this was not a great thing that you did, you know? So I think that
she was wrong.
I agree. But I think some of it was not just like, I love you and we're comrades and we have things to talk about. It was also like, I am a leader, and this is my opinion as a leader, you know?
Yeah.
So,
you know, I think both in her personal attraction for Sazed and also her political relationship, she wanted Sazed to play a certain role. And that's both in the she did not want to tell him how to take the lead in her in the relationship side or whatever. So she was kind of living in denial of that. And same thing in the politics. Like, this is your role in the Synod and the people, you know, as a keeper and everything else. And this is her vision for it, and he is not measuring up to that. And it took her a while to really get to know him for who he actually was, and maybe gain some appreciation for what he actually was, and not just the fact that he wasn't conforming to this model that she had, I think, in her mind for what he should be.
That's true. I guess she changed, you know, like after talking to him, she changed. She didn't insist to the end that she was right about it.
I don't know if I'm correct in reading this into the relationship that they had, but there seemed to be implications that they had kind of like loved each other for long before this book. Like, not just that they knew each other, but that they loved each other and didn't ever do anything about it because it wasn't appropriate, wasn't what they needed to do, all of those kinds of things. And I don't know if I just read that in there and there's not that, but that's a whole nother like layer too of like, if that's there, like the past love of like I don't know. That's what it sounded like to me anyway. I don't know.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Okay.
They had a history.
It wasn't just me.
Yeah,
Because I knew
well,
they
they
knew
were-
each other, but it sounded like they had loved each other in the past as well. So maybe not talked about it. But, Tony, this made me laugh. It's dire.
We're better than a football game?
We're on fire today, guys.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable. You keep using that word.
I think you know what it means.
Oh, goodness. Any other thoughts or anything people would like to bring up?
So I know I literally just stepped away for a second. Were you still talking about Sazed and Twin?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all we talked about while you were gone.
How do you feel about Vin and Ellen's relationship?
I actually really like them together a lot because of how polar opposite they are in a lot of ways. I think they balance each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that you don't love them together, Stephanie.
I like them individually. I just don't like. I think I appreciated it more this time because I noticed more of like the quieter moments. But I'm still just like shoulder shrug.
Not
Yeah.
invested in the
I mean, I
actual
don't hate
relationship
them.
part.
I
Yeah,
think the
but
first
I
time I
also
read
know
the
that-
series, I was that same way.
I've loved
It was
them
like-
together since the beginning, which is rare for me. Usually I do not care.
Yeah. I don't know. But I also know like romantic stuff isn't like his strong suit.
Yeah.
But
I actually like how he writes romance, and I think it's
Right.
because a lot of it feels very real world to me. Like
That's
it doesn't feel like this sweeping swoony romance, which is not how most people experience a relationship. And that's why I usually roll my eyes at a lot of romance, because people, it's like some sort of romantic-y book and the girl's like, oh, he's so hot, I'd die for him. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. Your self-preservation instincts would kick in and you would drop his butt and run off. Like, no, you wouldn't die for him. You don't even know him. And I feel like Sanderson is like, a lot of his romances just feel like more real world and more quiet. And so they feel more real to me than a lot of the swoony romances. Maybe that's just because I've been married for 16 years, though.
no, I agree though, because there is that whole thing in this one where it's like Vin thinks one thing, like, oh, Ellen thinks this of me, and that's why we can't be together. And then Ellen's like, oh, Vin thinks this of me, and that's why we can't. So, I mean, I get it is realistic.
That part did annoy me a little bit, this reread, honestly. So, like, if you just talk to each other.
That's very realistic.
That is very,
But they're
I'm
still
side with Stephanie
so
on that one, but I do agree. I mean, I think I expressed the same sentiments last time, Tiffany, is that, like, I know, like, people say that about Sanderson and romance, but most people that I've known who've been married for 20, 30 years or whatever that I talk to, and you ask, well, how did you meet your significant other or whatever? You get a story that sounds like a Sanderson novel, not one that sounds like Twilight, that's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's very
You mean
true.
not everybody meets because someone just stares at them awkwardly across the room?
Or because they're both
somebody's been
being
watching-
chased by assassins at the same time. That doesn't happen to everyone.
Somebody's been watching Honest Trailers.
I'm so glad that my husband wasn't just awkwardly staring at me across the room.
Or like in the movie, like you smelled bad. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my god. This is a fun point. We haven't talked about Alrienne at all. She's kind of a fun character. Like, she seems like
She
she's
is.
so flighty and like stupid. But then by the time you get to the end, she's like, oh no, I lean hard into that so people don't take me seriously and I can
Yeah.
do what needs to be done or what I want to do. And I'm like,
Well,
I
that reminded me in
appreciated her.
book one of what's her name, the informant at the balls.
oh yeah, the
where
gossip
she was
girl.
like acting like this complete ditz,
Yeah.
and here she is like getting people to open up and gossip, and then
Mhm.
selling all their secrets.
know. I
And
love
even
that.
Vin was like, I probably only feel this way because she wants me to. Like, it took her most of the book to realize that. So Ariane is like skill.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Although I do love how she's like, oh yeah, I'm making Breezy fall in love with me. And I'm like, you're actually not though. Like you think you're making this happen, but he actually does care about you on his own.
Every time she says breezy, it cracks me up.
I know.
Yes.
I love where he's like, he's with her and he's like, I'm just a dirty old man. Just like laughed at that. I
have
loved
to get
his character
going.
development in
I'm
this
so
too.
sorry.
What did you say?
I have to get going. I'm so sorry. We have a doctor visit that we have to get to. But blood work. But anyways, yeah. I gotta
Thanks
go.
for coming.
I'm sorry. I'm
No,
not
don't be
ready.
Happy
sorry.
bleeding.
Bye.
Bye. I was just gonna add that I really loved Breeze's character development in this too. Like how he has this just like outward persona of just not caring about anyone else, but how hard he's actually working because he cares about everyone. I liked that.
I forgot how strong his soothing powers were too.
Yeah.
Because there's that one scene when Vin realizes it. It's like I totally forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. I love during the battles where he's just standing on the walls, just trying so hard to soothe as many hundreds of soldiers. And then he's so down on himself for hiding. And I'm like, you just watch your friend standing next to you be killed.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone wanted to add? No?
I'm just happy I finished the book in time.
A month ago?
You're always so behind.
You got to catch up. Oh, well,
Like on
thank you.
chapter 13, or I just finished chapter 12 of book 3.
That'll be me like a month from now.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming and hanging out and chatting with us. This was really, really fun. We will be back next month to talk about Hero of Ages. We've been meeting on the first Saturday of the month, but next month we actually have to meet on the first Sunday, so it'll be a Sunday afternoon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll definitely be posting it on my YouTube, but also on Discord if you've been on there chatting with us there as well. So have a lovely rest of your weekend, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Yeah, nice chatting with everybody.